I used to be a broker in the city of London. On the outside, I had everything you would ever want. On the inside, I had nothing you would ever want. I was very depressed, probably drinking too much, just in a really bad place. And I stumbled across the movie The Motorcycle Diaries, which is a romanticized version of Che Guevara traveling around South America relying on kindness. And I had an epiphany. I was like, wow, there is another way to live, and I don't have to live like this anymore.
Welcome to the Better Human Podcast. My name is Greg Witz, and each week we're going to be bringing you some incredible and inspiring guests and topics that are going to take your life to the next level. Thanks for spending time with us. Sit back and enjoy the show. Leon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Man, listen, I got to tell you, I was watching some of your stuff earlier, and it reminded me of the importance of the messaging and what you do. So just for the audience, so we sort of could catch them up, I was watching your, you've got a Netflix special and a Discovery Plus special around you traveling around the world and really sort of experience different culture and people and talking about connection and kindness. And coincidentally, I also posted something on mental health today, and I was watching your stuff and I was looking at this whole world of mental health, and we've come through some pretty trying times. And the question I think I want to start with you is, in the world of stress and in the world of all the change and transition and conflict that we go through, you talk a lot about kindness. And in your experience and through your adventures, how easy or how hard is it for people to actually live that? I mean, the word kindness and being kind is easy. The actual true definition and the action of it might be very different.
Look, you're right. It's easy to talk about kindness. It's harder to actually live with an open heart. It's harder to actually dedicate yourself to living what I like to call beneath the world. And what I mean by that is there's a surface world out there, right? And that surface world is the news, Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc., etc. The world beneath that world, which is where the heart resides, if you can get to that place, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. And now I know you're going to say to me, how do you get to that place? Right?
Not yet, but let's go.
Not yet. Okay, I won't answer that. But it is easier to speak it. It is harder to walk it. It is harder to feel it. It is harder to be in that space where you are truly making a difference from beneath the world, right?
So with that, let's back up a little bit, right? Because we started with the deep end. Let's go back to the shallow end. Let's start with, where did this journey begin for you? Where did the conversation of kindness and operating in a world of service, where did that all begin and start for you?
As a kid, I was bullied. And I was bullied not just by kids. I was bullied by adults. I was bullied by teachers. I was bullied by uncles. I was bullied. And I never understood, specifically with the adults. I was like, I'm a kid. Why are you being such an asshole? What is going on? And I knew what it felt like to be profoundly alone, to be profoundly broken. And then I had a teacher who every day would look at me in the eyes and she would say to me, I believe in you. Mm-hmm. So I had the opposite understanding of pain. I also had the understanding of what it's like to be treated with respect. And I had those two things and I had to make a choice. I don't know if it was conscious or not. At some point it was, but early on, I think it was unconscious. I had to make a choice. Do I go down the path of love imperfectly, or do I go down the path of hate? Mm-hmm. And I knew what it felt like when someone goes down the path of hate. And I knew what it felt like when someone goes down the path of love. So I chose, to the best of my ability, to go down the path of love, to make you feel like my teacher made me feel, as opposed to how my uncles, or some of them, made me feel. Does that make sense? That's kind of how it worked.
Totally makes sense. And to that point, it was an external relationship that in quotations said things like, I'm proud of you. I believe in you. You're amazing. You're doing a great job. And we seek that from almost inner relationships, like your family, as you said, your uncles. Here's a question. Are you still in touch with that teacher, by the way?
Do you know, I dedicated my first book to her.
Amazing.
And she's actually in the last book I wrote too.
Amazing. Is she still teaching?
No, she's not.
Yeah. You know, how important is it for us to be teachers like this in life? Not just because we're a teacher with kids in school, but how important is it for us to live that role when it comes down to mentorship and leadership and being a teacher and a parent?
Look, I've been very fortunate, and I've dedicated the past 23 years to becoming better, to understanding myself, to understanding people. And it's my responsibility to use that understanding to help people, right? For many years, I would just travel for myself. For many years, I would just do things to make myself better. And then slowly, I started to realize, no, you can't do that. You have this wisdom, which was born out of pain. It's time to share it. You have to give it back to people. You have to do your best to inspire others to see that there is another way to be. So I think I don't consider myself to be a teacher, but I do teach on some level, right? I mean, I'm writing books, I'm doing shows, I'm giving speeches. So I think it's really important to take the wisdom, whatever wisdom we each have, and to pass it along.
You know, what you do is, I describe it as role modeling. And, you know, if you look at the most effective tool when it comes down to teaching, when it comes down to leadership, when it comes down to parenting, it's role modeling the behavior that we want to see. And, you know, as we started out talking earlier, you know, where I was going was, we're living in some very difficult times, and the world is almost, you know, this very chaotic, negative place right now. And I see the effect on people. And I see how people sometimes lose that focus. They become self-oriented. And some people don't even realize it. Some people don't even realize how their actions have started to become more self-serving versus others. And they'll jump on, you know, bandwagons, and they'll get on social media and express things, because that in some cases reminds people that, you know, this is their contribution to a good cause. So what are some of the things that you do? Okay, let's go back to the how question. That's where we pause. So what are some of the things, and it's not that these are like silver bullets where they're like one answer fits all type of thing, but I like the word practice. I like the word exercise. So what do you practice? What do you exercise? How do we continue to live in this world of giving and service and connection and being kind?
Well, thank you for asking that question. You're going to understand why in a moment. I will answer you, but I first want to tell you a story about what happened yesterday, because I don't want anyone to be like, oh, this man's perfect. He just knows exactly what to do all the time. He's the kindness guy. Everything flows to him, and he never gets angry. He never gets upset. And what a magical fellow. Mm-hmm. So yesterday, I don't know if you've been to Los Angeles, but there are these kind of like tourist vans that go around the hills, right? And there was this one van that was, it happens all the time. There's one van that literally every like maybe 300-400 feet, he would stop in the middle of the road. And I was sitting there and I was like, okay, I was on my Vespa. I was like, okay, this guy's really annoying me, but I'm not going to say anything to him, because I'm going to behave the way that I inspire others to behave. But this went on for like 2 miles. And I snapped. I went next to him. I shouted at him. I said, why are you stopping in the middle of the road, man? And I walked off and I ran off. And I felt so much shame in that moment. I was like, Leon, this isn't who you are. But in some ways, it is who we all are. There's a limit to what we can each take, right? So that's the perfection piece out the way. The how piece ultimately is a commitment. It's a commitment to who you want to be. you have to make a commitment. Like, yes, I had a flip out yesterday, but up until the moment of the flip out, I was like, you're not going to have a flip out. That is not who you are. But I had the commitment, right? The commitment was to do what I needed to be. When I had the flip out, I was like, oh no, I shouldn't have had that. And then I went back to the commitment of doing what needs to be. So without commitment, there is no hope when it comes to how we show up, specifically in this world, right? Because it's crazy. There's craziness going on, total craziness, being gaslit, all this kind of madness. I'm not talking about left or right or center or whatever. It's happening everywhere.
Chaos.
Exactly. So the most important thing is to make a decision to yourself that you are going to behave in a way and you are going to show up as the best version of you. And if you don't, that's okay. Get back on the wagon and keep on going. Commitment. And then there were little things, right? I mean, there were so many things that we can do. There's meditation. Like, oh, I can't meditate. Okay, fine. You can't meditate. Yes, you can. Like if I put a gun to your head and said meditate, you'd meditate, right? That calms us down. Not going into the chaos. Becoming aware of not going in to the chaos. I made a decision a couple of months ago to stop watching the news.
Yeah, good for you.
And sometimes people tell me what's going on, but generally I don't know. And one of the things he said in this book that I read, Stop Reading the News, he said the news is like a tornado. Do not go into it. So there were things like that. There were small little things that are really important, but it all starts. I mean, we could be here forever explaining the small little things. But unless you have a commitment to showing up with every fiber of your presence as often as you can, imperfectly, to be good, to be kind, to have empathy, to hold space. Pardon my French, but you're screwed.
Right. I love what you said there. You said three very important things. First, commitment, right? And we would talk about exercise and practice. And that's what I say to a lot of people in coaching and training, which is, look, these tools, these concepts, these processes, these things that we could implement, as you said, meditation, breathing, whatever, there are things to practice. There are things to take action on. They're not magical things that now you meditate and the world is warm and fuzzy and everything is now calm. Like, we have to go through the process sometimes. I'm a very fiery personality, right? So, when you were talking about being stuck behind the van, I completely related to that, right? The second part was you said flipper. I love the definition flipper. You had a flipper. I'm going to use that in the future. And the third was you said you rode a Vespa, which is very cool. What year of Vespa?
It's a new one, but it's probably 2019-ish.
Very cool. I was just looking at them the other day. But coming back to this, you were really, I was sharing with you a little bit about the work that I do before, which is around psychology and emotional intelligence. And I said, one of the things that we teach and we learn from this world is things like self-awareness. And that's what you were talking about, really becoming aware of, call it those triggers, those hooks, those things, those moments, right? What happens. And then, as we said, we could put 1,001 things in practice to help manage, which brings us to 2, which is something called affect regulate or emotional regulation, which is my temperature starts to boil and it goes. I'll share, I recently moved to Costa Rica and I was living in Canada during the pandemic, and it was pretty rough and despairing and challenging. And, I come from a world of being around people and community and giving, and it's, hosting. It's what fills my cup and fills my boat. And we ended up coming down here for a working vacation. We ended up staying. And one of the reasons for that was I was watching the community of people here, and I would use the word kind. And we were taken in by, call it a family. We're very close friends now, but we were invited into the celebration, into the table, into the connection. And I haven't experienced this, I would say, a lot or recently in North America. And it blew me away. And it's like, this is where I want to live. This is what I want my children growing up in, right? I want my kids in an environment where they learn to operate for other, and as we said, be empathetic and connected and community, because the thread to all of this, right, the thread to community is connection. And I think you say it as well, we can't have connection without that give, right, that relationship. So Yeah, I heard you say something else when I was watching one of your pieces earlier, which is we all have a need to be seen. Can you talk me through that?
As a kid, I was profoundly unseen.
Mhm.
I felt like I had no value. I felt like I didn't matter. And I know that there are many, many, many people in the world that feel the same way, whether it be as kids, whether it be as adults. Um, and when we feel unseen, we can't see ourselves. We can't see our own magnificence. We can't feel our heart. We can't live the life we're supposed to live. And ultimately, the trick is to see yourself, right? And not to necessarily need another human being to see you, okay? But to get to that place of seeing oneself, I found that you need another human being to see you. And when you do see someone, which is what the teacher did for me, right? When you do see someone, you're basically giving them the fuel to be their best selves. You're giving them permission to be their best selves. You're giving them permission to be. And that's why, to me, really the Kindness Diaries, which is the show you talked about when I went around the world, is really about seeing each other. It's about other people seeing me, and it's about me seeing them. And it goes back to the issue of community. And I think we live in a world where people generally don't see each other. We
Absolutely.
just, all you have to do is turn on the news and see people like screaming at each other.
Yeah.
It's total chaos. You look at, let's say, the CNN on the left, let's say, and they say one thing. Fox News on the right, they say something completely different, and no one is willing to find a middle ground. And that is like a societal lack when it comes to seeing each other.
Right. I said this, I've been saying this a lot. What's so scary about the times that we live in today, and that's what you're talking about, is the removal of dialogue, the removal of, I see your point and I see your position, and let's discuss this in dialogue. And we end up disagreeing, but somewhere in the middle. And it's not the statement, let's agree to disagree, because that's very passive aggressive. And I want to launch across the table when people say that to me, but then I remember to be kind. But it's the dialogue and the debate and the discussion and the sharing, because that's what the community is, sitting around that fire, right? Almost the storytelling. So you did this Wicked show, right? How did that project begin for you? Was it on the whim that you guys just found yourself doing it, or was it a really planned out sort of project that you ran with? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I used to be a broker in the city of London, and I've shared this many times, but I'm always asked, so I have to share again. And I was, on the outside, had everything you would ever want. On the inside, I had nothing you would ever want. I was very depressed, very disconnected, probably drinking too much, just in a really bad place. And I stumbled across the movie The Motorcycle Diaries, which is a romanticized version of Che Guevara traveling around South America, relying on kindness. And I had an epiphany. I was like, wow, there is another way to live, and I don't have to live like this anymore.
Hey, so sorry to interrupt, and thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you like today's episode and you want to learn more about some of our programs, like the Better Leader program that can change your life, go ahead and click the link below.
So, to cut a long story short, I quit my job and I started to travel around the world, relying on kindness. I did a few adventures. I hitchhiked from Times Square to the Hollywood sign with $5 a day. I hitchhiked around England, $5 a day. I walked from the Eiffel Tower to Red Square in Moscow. I drove from London to Mongolia. I did all these crazy things. Yeah. And then I ended up living in Los Angeles. And I kind of like went back to my old self a little bit. I wasn't in the corporate world, but I was kind of running a production company, and I wasn't living the way I wanted to live. And then I had another moment, another epiphany. I was walking down the street in Hollywood Boulevard, actually. And I saw this homeless chap with a sign that said, kindness is the best medicine. And I don't know what happened in that moment, but something happened in that moment, right? I gave the guy a little bit of money, spoke to him for a bit, and decided that I was going to quit my job again And this time I was going to do everything I wanted to do. I was going to give speeches. I was going to write books. I was going to create shows, other shows. And I created a show where I circumnavigated the world from LA all the way around the world back to LA on a vintage yellow motorbike, relying entirely on other people, food, gas, place to stay, everything. But I couldn't accept money. It had to be a connection. It had to be the exchange had to be love. The exchange had to be community. No money. Yeah. And at the end of each episode, we gave unsuspecting Good Samaritans a life-changing gift. So they had no idea what I was going to do. And me and the crew gave them a gift. Yeah. And that was just, I've done a lot more things since then, but it was just a very powerful thing that on some subconscious level, I flipped my life, because in London, I had money, but no connection. In the show, I had no money, but lots of connection. Mm-hmm. And, it was just a really beautiful experience.
Mm. What an amazing leap to take. And you know what they say, the universe will give you the lessons that you need. And if you don't receive them, or you don't learn them the first time, the universe will give them to you again and again and again. And that's kind of what your story was, which is, I got this lesson, bang, then I was walking down Hollywood's hit, bang, there's a lesson again. And, it's we have a responsibility to be like, hold on a second here. Wait a minute. What could I do? That's amazing. So, one story really stood out to me in your show, by the way. But before I go there, I'm interested in, I don't know if you have this or just average, out of 100%, every time you went out on these adventures, how many people rejected you or said no, or didn't operate with kindness and service and give? What was that percentage?
Sure. It's a great question. Look, it's high. I'd say 90 to 95% of people said no. But that doesn't mean that 95% of people were mean or unkind. It means that, out of that 95%, out of the 100%, maybe 35% were busy. The other 30% were scared. And the other 30% were just not pleasant. Right? So it's not that percentage is not a definition of 95% of the people are unkind. That's not the way it was.
Right. But you got a lot of no's. There was a lot of...
absolutely. But I find that that's what life is like as well, right? In the sense that specifically around connecting with people, you get a lot of people that you can't connect with, you can't see eye to eye with. They're not very pleasant. They're having a bad day. But you keep going and you find that one person, and then everything changes.
Mm-hmm. This is what I teach in customer service. You realize how important your job is, right? Which is like how you treat this customer might be the difference between what sets them on a better path in life or doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. Forces those negative perceptions. No one helps. No one looks after me. So I actually got another question as you're talking. Was there a particular type of person? Like, did you find that there was a certain personality that became that 5%? Like these were the people that tended to give more than others?
If you were connected to your heart, and as I said at the beginning, you were living beneath the world, more often than not, you wanted to help. Mm-hmm. If you were not connected to your heart and you were living on the surface of the world, more often than not, you didn't want to help.
Interesting. There was one story in your show, or there was an individual that I related to. I don't know where you were. I was actually wondering, you're in Pittsburgh, in the US. All right. Can you tell us that story and what the individual name was and how that all rolled out?
That's a life-changing story for me, for many people as well. So look, I would go up to people in the street. I would talk to them, we'd connect, and then I'd say, can I stay in your house tonight? And they'd be like, no, you can't. I get it. I went up into Pittsburgh and no one was helping, which is fine. I understand. I get it. And I asked someone if there was a park nearby, and they said, yeah, there's a park over there, but I wouldn't go there. It's kind of dangerous. And I was like, look, I'm so desperate. I'm going to go to this park. Something was driving me to this park. I start chatting with this guy. And we talk and I say, hey, can I stay in your house tonight? And he goes, look, I'm really sorry, but I'm homeless. Didn't look homeless. Felt a lot of shame. about to walk off, but he turns around and says, well, hold on. If you want, you can stay with me tonight. I'll feed you, I'll protect you, and I'll give you some clothes. There was every fiber of my being was like, Leon, my good friend, you are not sleeping on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight. It's not happening. But there was that counterintuitive voice that said, Leon, buddy, you are sleeping on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight. And that is exactly what happened. His name was Tony. I ended up sleeping for one night under the roof of a church, the outside roof of a church. And he taught me two unbelievable lessons that I've never forgotten. One, kindness is free. It's free. I don't care how cool you are or how cool you think you are, how much money you have or how much money you don't have. Kindness is free. And you get to choose how you show up. Like yesterday, I chose to show up, like a bit of an asshole, right? By screaming at the guy. But I then get to choose to show up not like an asshole as often as I can. Kindness is free. Second, he taught me that true wealth is not in our wallets. It is in our hearts. Now, I'm not suggesting people give away all their money, right? I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting you don't become the richest man in the world. I'm not suggesting you don't become famous. I'm not suggesting you don't become a super success. But what I am saying is that the truest of wealth is how you show up. The truest of wealth is how you treat people. Like yesterday, in that moment, I felt very, very poor. I did. I felt poor. I was like, man, you can't behave like that. Right. And there were moments when I'm in a good space and I'm treating people well, when I feel very, very rich. The truest of wealth is not in our wallets, it's in our hearts. And you know, I remember the following morning, I said to Tony, his name was Tony, I said, how did you sleep? And he said, well, I didn't sleep so well. I said, well, why not? He said, well, because I spent the whole night taking bugs off you. Right. There was a man of goodness, not a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination, But.
And what was Tony's story? How did he end up on the streets?
He'd been sleeping on the streets for years.
Wow.
He told me some stories about his childhood that I'm not going to repeat, but if you heard these stories, you'd be like, well, of course the man's going to have psychological problems. Mm-hmm. If someone does that to him, of course he's going to have psychological problems. Mm-hmm. So he was there for years, and I did it for one night, and it shifted everything. And he would always say to me, he would say, you changed my life. And I would always say the same thing to him. I'd say, man, you are the one that changed my life. And that is the truth. And whenever I think of the Kindness Diaries, I think of him, because he epitomized the entire show. It was everything flowed through that one episode, that one 11 or 12 minutes of on the screen. It took a lot longer in person of like meeting Tony.
It's amazing. You know, my father was a fucking lunatic. He was an insane, intense man, you know, British descent, grew up in South Africa. But as nuts as he was, and I'd say this is where I get my fiery side from, right? At the core of it, this man would give everything. And I'll never forget, there was a guy by the name of Michael. He was an artist, and he would make these beautiful statues, right? I'm sure you've traveled through South Africa and Africa. There are some incredible artistic expressions when it comes down to these carvings and statues and stuff. Anyway, I don't know. We were in Canada at the time, and my father bumped into him, and he told him a story. He said, "Look, I've got no money. I'm out of work. I've got my art, and you know, I've got no food. And you know, he's got a young daughter, and he's completely desperate. Would my father buy a statue?" Right? Anyway, my father said, "Listen, why don't you bring all of your statues over to my house? Here's my address. Come over to my house and come bring them all." Anyway, he showed up with a truck, like a pickup truck of these statues. I think it was probably about $15,000 or $17,000. My father gave him. He said, "I'll buy all of your statues." And I still have them. We still, the family, between the siblings, there's these statues everywhere. They're very reminding of growing up in South Africa. But that's been a moment that I've always remembered. And it's still a story that I'll talk about with my sister and brother today. Right. And I think we all need to operate like this. That was a story of, he was in a position to financially help, but it wasn't the money that helped. It's what you were describing before, being seen. And one of our human needs is to have significance. And the way we have significance is by being seen. Because if I'm seen, I'm important, I'm significant. If I'm important and significant, you're listening to me, right? You'll help me. And I think that's the core to what I hear you saying a lot, which is kindness is the core of it is to help, to give. And in the world that we live in today, we need to remind ourselves of that. You're a very inspiring dude, my friend.
That's very sweet. And I was just about to say to you that story about the
Michael.
Michael, about the statues is exactly what your hat is all about. Making humans better humans. Because by telling that story, someone will think to themselves, ooh, if that guy can do what he did for Michael, then why can't I maybe do something for someone else? And therefore I will become a better human.
Correct. The other side to that story is we bumped into Michael years later, and he was very successful. And when I say that, he was situated in his business, and he was doing his thing, and just a happy guy. So amazing. We like to wrap up the show with one very important question, which is, what do we all need to do to be better humans? And I think you just spent the last 35 minutes telling us what we need to do. But if we were to sum this all up, what could we all do to be a better human tomorrow?
Commit to how you show up for yourself and for others, and know that it is a choice. You get to choose how you show up, and you can choose hate, like I did yesterday, or you can choose love. You choose.
To that point, it's more powerful that you're able to recognize it and catch it and change it versus anything else, right? It's not about not slipping. It's about slipping and seeing that I slipped and then reminding ourselves to get back to work again, right?
Exactly.
If the audience want to find out more about your shows, which I highly recommend, where can they go and what are the shows called? And if they want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, where can they do that?
Sure. Look, the two simple ways are go to Google, put the kindness guy into Google, and everything about me will show up. So the kindness guy into Google, or the kindness guy into Instagram. That's the simplest way to explain it.
Amazing. Leon, I can talk to you for hours and hours and hours. This was very inspiring. But more than that, it was reinforcing and a reminder that that there's others out in the world still fighting the good cause and putting out good vibes and hopefully leaving people a little better off than they were before. You're amazing. All right. If you like today's episode, don't forget to like the show, subscribe, share it, and we will see you next time. And of course, Leon, we're going to make sure that we get all of your information in the footnotes. All right, Leon, you want to say goodbye one more time?
Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. And never give up on your dreams, my friends.
Amazing. All right, we're out. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for listening today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, you're going to love the next one.